The courtroom was suffocatingly silent. A 9-year-old Emily stood at the witness stand, her small fingers clutching the edge. The weight of 100 stares pressed against her tiny frame. She felt them: judge, jury, lawyers, all waiting for her to speak. But she couldn't. Across the room, Jonathan Cross sat at the defense table, his arms casually folded, a slow smirk creeping across his face. The man who had haunted her nightmares now sat comfortably, like this was just another day for him. Emily's throat tightened. She knew the truth. She had seen it all. But the words stuck like heavy stones inside her. The defense attorney sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "Your Honor, the witness is clearly unable to testify. I request an immediate dismissal." A gavel strike. Judge Samuel Thornton's deep voice cut through the silence. "Miss Emily, do you understand the importance of your testimony?" Emily lowered her gaze. She wanted to speak. She wanted to stop the bad man. But then something shifted. Her small hands twitched. A barely noticeable movement. She glanced toward the heavy wooden doors. And at that moment, they swung open. A dog walked in. A massive German shepherd, his sleek black and tan coat gleaming under the courtroom lights. His ears stood tall, his sharp eyes scanning the room with fierce focus. He moved with purpose, a silent force of nature. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as the dog walked straight to Emily's side and sat down, protective, unshaken, ready. His name was Ace, and he was here for her. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching us from, and please like this video to support the channel. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. 3 years earlier, the night was cold, the wind howling through the narrow alleyways of the city. 6-year-old Emily walked beside her mother, Rachel, holding her hand tightly. They had just left the grocery store, their bags filled with food for the week. But then Emily stopped. Something moved in the shadows between two dumpsters. A soft whimper, a weak, struggling breath. Emily's heart clenched. She let go of her mother's hand and took a cautious step forward. "Emily, wait," Rachel warned. But Emily was already kneeling. A dog lay curled against the brick wall thin, shivering, his ribs showing through his fur. He had patches of dirt on his black and tan coat, and one of his paws looked swollen. He lifted his head slightly, ears twitching, but he didn't run. Emily stretched out a tiny hand. "Hey, buddy, it's okay." The dog watched her carefully, his deep brown eyes so tired, so worn, locked onto hers. Rachel sighed. "Sweetheart, we can't—" "Mum, look at him," Emily whispered. "He needs us." Rachel hesitated. She knew her daughter's heart was too big to ignore something like this. Emily turned back to the dog, who still hadn't moved. For the first time, he let out a small, shaky breath and slowly inched toward her. That was all it took. Emily smiled. "Come on, buddy, let's go home." Rachel wrapped the dog in an old blanket, settling him onto a soft spot in the laundry room. He didn't move much that night, too exhausted to do anything but sleep. Emily sat beside him, whispering softly, "You're safe now." The next morning, his tail wagged just once, but it was enough. Rachel shook her head, knowing there was no turning back. "Well, looks like we've got a new family member." Emily's eyes lit up. "Really?" Rachel sighed, smiling. "What should we call him?" Emily thought for a moment, then grinned. "Ace." From that day on, Ace and Emily were inseparable. Ace wasn't just any stray. Emily realized that within the first week, most dogs took time to settle into a new home, but Ace acted like he had lived there forever. He learned their routine instantly, waited by the door before Emily even asked to go outside, and never barked for attention. He was calm, quiet, always observing. And then there were the commands. One evening, Emily was playing in the backyard when a ball rolled under the porch. Without thinking, she pointed, "Get it, Ace." He obeyed instantly, not just picking up the ball but moving with military precision. He lowered his head, crawled beneath the wooden beams, and retrieved it like a trained professional. Emily blinked. She had never taught him that. "Mom," she called, "did you show Ace how to do tricks?" Rachel looked up from the porch swing. "No, sweetheart." Emily turned back to Ace, who sat patiently by her feet, tail wagging just slightly. Something about him was different. As weeks passed, more strange things happened. Ace didn't like everyone. When a friendly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, came over, he wagged his tail and let her scratch behind his ears. But when a delivery man approached their porch one day, Ace stiffened. His ears perked, his body tensed, and a deep growl rumbled from his chest. The man backed away. Maybe I'll just leave the package here." Rachel frowned. "Ace, what's wrong?" Ace didn't move until the man left. It was like he sensed something. Then, one afternoon, Emily tried walking Ace through town. They passed a small alley, just a normal street corner, but Ace stopped dead in his tracks. His body stiffened, his ears pinned back. He refused to move forward. Emily tugged the leash. "Come on, boy, it's just a street." Ace growled, his tail lowered not in anger, but in fear. Whatever was down that alley, he didn't trust it. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. What had this dog been through before he found her? Rachel finally decided to take Ace to the vet for a full checkup. He was strong, healthy, but there was something off. "I'm going to scan for a microchip," Dr. Patel said, running a small device over Ace's shoulder. If he had an owner before, the chip would tell them. Silence. The vet frowned, adjusting the scanner. No result. He tried again. Nothing. "That's impossible," Dr. Patel muttered. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The vet sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Dogs like this don't just appear. He's too well trained, too disciplined. If he belonged to someone, he should have a chip." Emily hugged Ace protectively. "So what does that mean?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "It means someone didn't want him to be found." Rachel and Emily exchanged a look. Who was Ace before he became theirs? The night was still. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves outside and the distant hum of cars passing on the main road. Emily lay curled in bed, Ace resting at her feet. His rhythmic breathing was comforting, a steady reminder that he was always there, always watching over her. But then a noise. A faint rustling outside her window. Not the wind, not an animal, something else. Emily's eyes snapped open. She didn't move, didn't breathe. She just listened. Thinner shadow moved. It was fast, barely noticeable, but Ace saw it first. In an instant he leaped from the bed, his entire body tense, a deep guttural growl rumbling from his chest. Emily sat up, heart pounding. Ace never growled like that unless something was wrong. Then came the sound a light tap on the glass. Emily's breath hitched. Someone was outside. "Ace?" she whispered. The German shepherd stood rigid, his ears locked forward, his stance defensive. He was ready to protect. Rachel's footsteps rushed down the hall. "Emily, what's going on?" Emily barely managed to point at the window. Rachel's face hardened. She flicked on the porch light and ran outside, but the shadow was gone. Whoever it was had disappeared into the night. Rachel locked the doors. "It was probably just someone passing through," she said, trying to sound calm. "But from now on, we keep the security lights on." Emily didn't argue, but she knew. That wasn't just someone passing through. The next day, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She and her mum went to the grocery store, but something felt off. Ace wasn't with them this time. Rachel didn't allow dogs inside stores. And yet, Emily's skin prickled as she stepped out of the car. Then she saw him. A man, standing near the back of the parking lot, talking aggressively to another man. Emily's stomach twisted. It was the same shape, the same height as the shadow from last night. She nudged Rachel. "Mum, look." Rachel followed her gaze. "Don't stare, sweetheart." But Emily couldn't look away. Something was wrong. And then, before she could blink, it happened. The man grabbed the other guy by the collar, shoving him hard against a parked car. Emily froze. Rachel gasped, quickly pulling Emily behind her. "Get in the car, now!" Emily's pulse pounded as she scrambled into the passenger seat. Rachel locked the doors. She watched as the man leaned in, saying something low and threatening. The other man looked terrified, and then the man punched him. Emily's hands shook. She knew she should look away, but she couldn't. For just a second, the man turned his head. His eyes met Emily's through the windshield. A cold, cruel smile spread across his face. And that's when she realized he had seen her. His gaze lingered for only a moment before he turned and walked away, vanishing between the rows of cars. Emily felt sick. Rachel's voice was urgent. "Emily, are you okay?" Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Mum, I think he was outside our house last night." Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Neither of them knew his name yet. But soon, the world would know him as Jonathan Cross. Emily ran all the way home, her heart pounding, her breaths coming in short gasps. She didn't stop until she reached the front porch, nearly tripping over the steps. Ace was waiting at the door, ears perked, eyes sharp. Rachel looked up from the kitchen as Emily rushed inside. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Emily shook her head. She couldn't say it. Not about the man in the parking lot. Not about his cold, knowing stare. Not about how she was sure, absolutely sure he had been the same shadow outside her window that night. Rachel frowned. "Emily? I'm just tired," Emily mumbled, hugging Ace tightly. Rachel studied her for a moment, but didn't push. "Okay, baby, let's get you something to eat." Emily nodded, but she had no appetite. She barely touched her dinner, barely said a word. And that night, she didn't sleep. Every time Emily closed her eyes, she saw him. Jonathan Cross. The way he shoved that man, the way he smiled when he saw her watching. He knew. Emily lay curled in bed, Ace stretched beside her. His body was warm, solid, a wall between her and the dark. Ace didn't sleep much that night either. Every so often, he would lift his head, his ears twitching, as if he could sense the fear that hung thick in the air. Emily clenched the blanket tighter. She thought about telling her mum. She thought about calling the police. But what if he found out? What if he came back? So she stayed quiet. And the nightmares didn't stop. Days passed. Emily thought maybe, just maybe, she had imagined it all. Then, on a quiet afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Rachel wiped her hands on a dish towel before opening it. 2 uniformed police officers stood outside. Rachel's brows furrowed. "Can I help you?" One of the officers, a tall man with graying hair, nodded. "Mrs. Emily, we need to speak with you and your daughter." Rachel's back stiffened. "Why? What's this about?" The second officer glanced down at his notepad. "There was an incident in a parking lot a few days ago. An assault. We believe your daughter might have witnessed it." Emily froze. Her hands tightened around Ace's fur. The officers exchanged a look. "Ma'am, it's important. If she saw something, we need her help." Rachel turned to Emily. "Sweetheart, did you see something?" Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. The officers waited. Rachel knelt beside her, her voice soft. "Emily, honey, you can tell us." She wanted to, but she saw Cross's face in her mind. That smirk, that quiet, knowing look. She thought of what he had done to that man, and what he might do if he found out she had spoken. So she stayed silent. Rachel sighed, looking up at the officers. "I'm sorry. She's been quiet lately, ever since." She hesitated. "Since the break-in." The officers exchanged another glance. The older one nodded. "We understand. If she remembers anything, please give us a call." They handed Rachel a card and left. Rachel shut the door and turned back to Emily. "Sweetheart, if something is wrong, you have to tell me," she said gently. Emily looked up at her mother, then down at Ace, and said nothing. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Emily stood at the witness stand, her small hands gripping the edge of the podium so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, the jury, the spectators, the lawyers. They were all waiting for her to say something, but she couldn't. Across the room, Jonathan Cross leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. His lawyer smirked, adjusting his suit cuffs like this was all a joke. "Your Honor," the defense attorney sighed dramatically, "the witness refuses to speak. There is no testimony. No testimony means no case. I move for an immediate dismissal." Judge Samuel Thornton rubbed his temple, clearly frustrated. He had given Emily time, given her space, but she just stood there, silent. The weight of the moment pressed on her. She wanted to tell the truth. She wanted to expose the man who had haunted her dreams. But Jonathan Cross was watching her. Not just watching, studying her. Like he knew exactly why she was afraid. The judge exhaled heavily and picked up his gavel. "If the witness is unwilling to testify, I will have no choice but to." The doors swung open. A rush of whispers swept through the courtroom. Every head turned. A dog walked in. Ace, the large German shepherd, strode forward, his sleek black and tan coat gleaming under the courtroom lights. He moved with purpose, his paws barely making a sound on the polished floor. But what made the room go silent wasn't just his presence, it was his eyes. Ace wasn't looking at Emily. He was looking straight at Jonathan Cross. His ears perked, his body stiffened, and then he growled. A deep, low rumble that sent a chill through the courtroom. Jonathan Cross's smirk faded. His fingers curled into fists. For the first time since the trial started, he looked nervous. The low, rumbling growl sent a chill through the courtroom. Ace didn't move. He didn't bark. He just stared, ears standing tall, his body tensed like a coiled spring. His gaze never left Jonathan Cross. Cross shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie. "What's the meaning of this?" he scoffed, forcing a chuckle. But there was something off about his voice, like he was suddenly aware of how many people were watching. Rachel stood up from her seat in the gallery. Her voice was steady. "Your Honor, this dog Ace was with Emily the night she saw what happened." Judge Thornton frowned. "And?" Rachel turned to Emily, her eyes filled with encouragement. Emily swallowed hard. The judge leaned forward. "Miss Emily, are you saying your dog witnessed the event?" Emily didn't answer. Instead, she slowly raised her hand. Ace's ears twitched. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Emily made a subtle movement, a tiny flick of her fingers. Ace reacted immediately. His growl deepened, a low warning sound that sent shivers down spines. His fur bristled, his muscles tensed. But what made the room truly fall silent was Jonathan Cross. He had gone pale, his jaw tightened, and for the first time since the trial began, he looked scared. The moment Ace growled, gasps rippled through the courtroom. The jury leaned forward, the spectators exchanged whispers. Even Judge Thornton, who had remained neutral throughout the trial, narrowed his eyes in interest. At the defense table, Jonathan Cross forced a chuckle, though it came out shaky. "It's just a dog," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "This proves nothing." But his fingers twitched as he adjusted his tie. The prosecutor, Mr. Lawson, stepped forward. Unlike Cross, he didn't look amused. "Your Honor," Lawson said, turning to the judge, "Ace is no ordinary dog." Judge Thornton arched an eyebrow. "Explain." Lawson nodded toward a man sitting in the second row. He was dressed in a dark suit, his posture rigid, his badge barely visible under his coat. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "A police officer." The man stood and walked towards the front of the courtroom. "Your Honor, my name is Officer David Holloway. I work with the K-9 unit." He glanced at Ace, then back at the judge. "And I can confirm that Ace is not just a family pet." Murmurs filled the room. Emily's grip on the podium tightened. "What are you saying?" Judge Thornton asked. Lawson nodded to Holloway. The officer turned towards the jury. "Ace was once a police K-9. A stunned silence followed. Jonathan Cross's smirk vanished. Lawson pressed on. Ace wasn't just any dog, he was part of an elite training program. He was trained to track criminals, detect danger, and identify threats. He turned, locking eyes with Cross. And right now he's looking at one. All eyes shifted to Jonathan Cross. For the first time he had no words. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Jonathan Cross shifted in his seat, his once relaxed posture now stiff. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. Judge Thornton adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. His voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Cross, if you have nothing to hide, why do you look nervous?" Cross forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. We're talking about a dog's reaction, not real evidence." But Ace wasn't moving. He remained locked onto Cross, his golden brown eyes unblinking. His ears were high, his entire body coiled with tension. He knew. Cross pulled at his collar, his fingers fidgeting against the table. He looked around, searching for support. The jury wasn't laughing. The spectators weren't whispering anymore. They were watching him, waiting. And then Emily moved. She had been quiet the entire time, standing behind the podium, frozen in fear. But now her small hands uncurled from the edges of the wood. She took a breath. Then she stood. Her voice shook, but it was clear. He was there that night. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Cross's smirk disappeared entirely. His face went pale. Emily lifted her chin, her fingers curling into tiny fists. She wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was finally coming out. The courtroom was dead silent. Jonathan Cross stared at Emily, his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't believe what she had just said. His fingers twitched against the table. Then he chuckled, a hollow, forced sound. "This is absurd," he scoffed, shaking his head. "You're really going to let a scared little girl and a dog decide this case?" But his voice cracked at the end. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Ace remained still, his body low, ears sharp, eyes locked onto Cross. A bead of sweat rolled down Cross's temple. His lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something, but Cross wasn't listening. His breathing turned shallow. His hand clenched into a fist. And then he snapped. "Fine!" he shouted, slamming his fist against the table. His chair screeched as he shot to his feet. The entire courtroom flinched. "I was there," he yelled, his face red, his voice shaking with anger. "But so what? That doesn't mean anything." The room erupted in gasps. The jury members exchanged stunned glances. The prosecutor froze, blinking in shock. Judge Thornton's grip tightened around his gavel. Rachel pulled Emily closer, but Emily didn't move. Ace took a step forward. His fur bristled. His growl, a deep, slow rumble, echoed through the silent courtroom one last time. Jonathan Cross slumped back into his chair, his face pale. The words had already left his mouth. There was no taking them back. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, people whispering in shock. Judge Thornton banged his gavel. "Order in the court!" The jury members exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. A confession in open court. There was no need for further argument. The judge turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you have enough to reach a verdict. You may begin deliberations." The jurors didn't even leave the room. They leaned toward each other, whispering for less than a minute before the foreman stood up. "Your Honor, we have reached a unanimous decision." Judge Thornton nodded. "Proceed." The foreman cleared his throat. "We find the defendant, Jonathan Cross, guilty on all charges." A collective gasp filled the courtroom, followed by a burst of relieved murmurs. Emily finally exhaled, the weight on her chest lifting. Rachel pulled her into a tight hug, whispering, "It's over, sweetheart." Judge Thornton glanced at Ace, who still sat calmly beside Emily, his eyes sharp and focused. A hint of amusement flickered across the judge's face. "Seems like this dog just solved the case," he said. The entire courtroom erupted in applause. The courtroom was no longer silent. The weight of fear, tension, and uncertainty had lifted. People murmured in awe, some smiling, others shaking their heads in disbelief. But the loudest sound of all came from the back, a wave of applause. Judge Thornton struck his gavel once but didn't seem too eager to stop it. Even he knew this was no ordinary case. Ace sat proudly beside Emily, his ears perked, his tail wagging slightly. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was the hero who had brought justice. One of the officers who had worked on the case stepped forward. "Your Honor, on behalf of law enforcement, I'd like to recognize Ace for his bravery." The judge nodded, agreed. He looked at Emily. "Young lady, I believe you had help solving this case." Emily finally smiled for the first time in months. She turned to Ace and wrapped her arms around his thick fur. "I wasn't alone," she whispered, burying her face into his neck. "He was with me the whole time." Rachel placed a gentle hand on Emily's back, her voice thick with emotion. "I think he was meant to find you, sweetheart." Ace wagged his tail as if he understood. As Emily, Rachel, and Ace turned to leave, the entire courtroom erupted into applause once more. And for the first time in a long time, Emily walked out of the courthouse without fear. Ace proved that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, even on four legs. If you believe in loyalty, courage, and the power of truth, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories.